Hey, welcome to the 360th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode was brought to you by patrons Victor Prado and Kimberly DiVincenzo. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan, and right now we're going to go straight into the second half of our episode about soup to nuts, how we get a job, do the job, and finish the job, and release the job.
If you are interested in shooting commercials with celebrities, I suggest starting at the beginning.
Yeah, one episode ago,
359. And if you already listened, hey, thanks. We've got more great information for you. So let's hop into episode 360, part 2 of our Working with Celebrities in Commercials. Well, to that point about wall-to-wall dialogue and just working with the celebrities in general, two things kind of came to mind. One, I worked really, really hard with the agency, and they really got it, of keeping our scripts lean because we knew that our celebrity was going to make it their own, that they were going to add in funny looks and asides and punchlines.
Well, I actually want to dig into this just for a couple minutes, because one of my pet peeves with a lot of these people that write stuff for, I have another kind of celebrity thing that's shooting in March, and the whole time it's like, oh, he's gonna make it his own. He's gonna put it in his words. We're gonna write here. This is our idea, but we'll have him say it in his words. And a lot of these celebrities, Rebel is an exception. She was very involved. Wanted to know exactly the script. Wanted to approve everything. Wanted to come into the shoot knowing what she's doing and why. Some celebrities, I'm sure you've worked with them too, show up and they're like, okay, what are we doing? And you're like, say this, say this.
100%. Yeah.
And they're like, okay, thanks, I'm out. It's a job, it's a paycheck, and they don't really. They don't want to look bad, and they want to do a good job, but they don't want to have to write the script for you.
Rewrite it for you.
And so,
definitely,
to me, that's the thing with celebrities, especially, but any comedy people is, we tell the agency we're gonna work with them to make sure it's in their voice, but in the meantime, you and I are coming up with lists of things to give them. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't like this, how about this? Or how about this? And or how would you say this? I was thinking maybe like this. And you give them an out to not have to write it themselves.
There's a huge difference between how would you say this versus make it your own, right? We have a joke there.
Right.
That if they just read verbatim the copy, we'll be fine. We'll be great. But how would you say this, I think, is the key phrase of just kind of moving clauses around or swapping a word or two is what I'm talking about, right? But I was reminded on set, saying faster is the worst thing you can say to an actor. Do you know what I mean? And we were constantly, even with this kind of lean, easy breezy script, there's still stuff that a comedic actor wants to add a beat there, or take a look, or toss a look to the camera, all of those kind of comedic moments. And the amount of coverage that we were shooting was pretty small because we only had a couple hours basically with this person each day. And so you kind of short circuit all of your backup plans for how to cut around a performance that maybe has a little bit too much air for 30 seconds. And so that was really the name of the game on this one. Balancing ways in which they could quote unquote make it their own with the time constraints and without adding to it, and with the performance being accurate to their persona, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I try to, front load that, hey, we need this to be short, so we can't make it any longer. Is there a funny way that you would do this or do this? It's weird. But when you have a celebrity, the other thing that you can really do is you can say, hey, Rebel wants to do it this way. Tim wants to do it this way.
Sure. Yeah.
With our nunchuck scene, we knew that Rebel is pretty good at nunchucks. She actually used to teach karate or something, or some martial art. And so we had this idea that she picks up some nunchucks and does some really amazing moves with them. But on set, it was just taking a really long time. And I was like, can we do one take where you're not actually good at nunchucks? You pick them up and you just knock something off the table, then hit the camera person. She's like, okay. And that ended up being the take we used because it was just 10 times shorter.
So much faster. Yeah.
But she had an idea too that we had this giant box of money, a suitcase filled with money, because it's an action film and it says props don't touch, and she's like, what if I just walk down and just touch every single thing next to this props don't touch. I was like, yeah, or maybe you take a stack of 20s out or something. And we did do that. That was her idea, and we did shoot it, and it was funny, but you know, it kind of like broke a little bit the premise of that everything she's doing is unintentionally rebellious. So we ended up not using it. But yeah, I think it's like that stuff. And when you have a celebrity, when you have just a non-celebrity actor, the client or agency will get upset that you're wasting time trying the actor's ideas. But when you have a celebrity, you can be like,
no, that's what you're paying for.
They want, they think this is what is more accurate to them. So
yeah.
So it's fun.
I was going to say one other important thing, maybe the most essential thing, is just establishing trust with the celebrity early on.
Yes. What's your move?
I
get their name tattooed on my elbow.
Yeah. I go in and I talk to them at the top of the day when they're comfortable, like, you know, not whether necessarily getting vanities done or whatever, but like, you know, around that time, I will talk to them about the nature of commercials and how there are many stakeholders, all who need different things. And sometimes there are going to be some directions that I'm going to give you that are going to sound stupid to you. And I know that, and we're going to work on it together. And, you know, every once in a while I'm going to be like, hey, can you smile when you say the product's name? And we'll get it in a way that you feel really good about, and we'll get it in the way that the client feels really good about. But like, I'm telling you to do these things not because I think they're a good idea necessarily, but because I was asked to, essentially, is what I'm saying. And I do that because one of my first celebrity jobs, we shot for 2 days, and it wasn't until lunch on the second day that he realized that I would go over to the village and then come back with a note that didn't make any sense.
Wait, can you tell us who it was?
It was Ken Marino.
Oh,
It was Ken Marino. Okay. And I remember him covering up his mic and being like, he literally said, "Are they making you say this to me?" And I nearly started crying. I was like, yeah, I love Ken Marino.
He's
I was so excited. And I was like, yes. And he was like, oh, I get it. I just thought you were dumb. And that's not to say I'm not going to have to try to make some things that feel nonsensical, feel kind of dumb, make sense in this commercial. I'm going to say some dumb things to you, celebrity. And I apologize in advance, and like, let's just figure it out together, because I'm going to be vulnerable, and I know it's your face and you're vulnerable too. Yeah. And that's kind of the beginning. And then, you know, you just kind of like workshop some jokes together and like say things like, how would you do it? Or, you know.
Yeah. Or do you think it would be funny if.
Do you think it would be funny if
you
that's
bumped
great.
Into this thing?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And then also, honestly, like laughing, you know, showing them that you think it's funny. And because they're performers, they
need the validation.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you what, when you get a laugh from Video Village and you can hear it, it changes the day.
Yeah.
It changes the day.
I literally do that thing. I mean, I'm always honest about it. It's not like I lie about it, but I'll walk up to them. I'll be like, just so you know, we're all like just cracking up back there. Like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I've never done that. The like, hey, just so you know, I might give you some insane notes. I mean, maybe if like I was really primed to think that that's going to be coming, but you know, I worked with Tim Meadows, a pretty good sized campaign. We're shooting also at Universal Studios and stuff. And the agency people just kept saying like, hey, we want to see more teeth, more smiles. And I'm like, that is not a good note. And that's like not a note anyone wants. And I think you can be like, hey, Tim, can you just give us a real big cheesy smile or something like after you do that? Like you can try to kind of lean into like the corniness of it, but it was hard. And they would literally just point at me and like point at the sides of their mouth, do a smile. And I'm like, so to that, I'd go up to Tim. I'm like, hey, I think you're so freaking funny and so natural. The agency just wants to see if you could do one take with just like a really big smile. They think that that might be funny. And he'd be like, yeah, okay. Like, you know, I think we're saying the same thing, but you want to infuse them with the idea that you have the same taste as them.
Yeah, but I think also the intent is not to throw people under the bus. It's to explain that there are additional things that make this campaign successful, delivering the message and the ideals and all of that. But then also to get on the same page of like, well, if it's not working for you, let's figure out how to make it work. That's the important takeaway. I'm not trying to put anybody down, because everybody's doing their job. You know what I mean? What you don't want is if you lose them and they're like, sure, fine, yeah, and then they just do a big cheesy grin.
Yeah, you've lost the authenticity of the whole thing.
Right, exactly. And then they're just kind of phoning it in for the rest of the time. Do you know what I mean? You want them to give their best to you.
And by the way, they also probably aren't super interested in working with you again.
Sure, yeah.
Because you're all part of the bad guy team.
Right, exactly. And so you want to just be a confidant for them, you know? And if they're like, hey, I don't think this is working.
Yeah, and you just go back to the agency and say, hey, they don't like that. Can we find another solution?
Let's figure it out. Give me a second. Yeah.
Unrelated to celebrities, but obviously extra with them is I try to tell them what the camera is seeing. Like, that was so funny. That was awesome what you did. From the camera, it kind of looks like you didn't really like the cheese. I think it's just because of our angle or something. Like, I know what you did felt right to you, but from the camera, it looks a little different, you know, and that happens a lot. It's just a thing, right?
And if they're a celebrity, they've been on set a bunch. And honestly, oftentimes their entourage is there to keep an eye on the monitor so that they're being presented in the way that they want to be presented.
Well, so that's shooting. Post-production, you just finished.
Yeah.
We know with commercials, it's all over the place, especially in the U.S. Many times, that's the last time you'll ever talk to anyone is when you leave set. Other times, you get to do a director's cut, and then they cut you out. Other times, they keep you involved the whole time. So on my shoot, I got really lucky because we didn't really have like a proper agency producer who usually oversees the post-production. And so the EP from my company, Great Guns, Oliver, was the person that was overseeing it. And he knew that I would make sure that I like the edit, and you know, and we also shot it in like the series of Steadicam shots that kind of cut from one to the next, and was like almost no coverage. So there's not a lot of ways you can edit my spot.
I wanted more coverage, and again, because of time, you're just like, well, this is what it is. And so I basically turned in my director's cut and then saw tweaks from the agency cut, and there were only a few things that I could point out as explicitly different.
That's good.
And that's partially because I think everybody was really into it, and the agency was sessioned with me, and I did a pretty thorough creative presentation. Yeah. So like, it was really just tiny tweaks, basically.
The place where I was a real stickler was VFX, because, you know, obviously I have a VFX background, and there's some jokes in there where she hits the camera with the nunchucks that didn't actually happen. We like did that in post, and where the snakes come are all around set at the end, like we added them in post. And you know, the flamethrower we wanted to make as big as possible, so we, you know, made it big in post. And those are things that I kind of fought for because I just saw these opportunities. Like I mentioned she throws these 4 cups of coffee and burns some whatever PA or something. And in the very final shot where we have a wide shot of the set, I wanted to see that spilled coffee off in the background. Something that like 99 out of 100 people would never notice. But it's a really easy thing in VFX just to add some spilled coffee in the background. So that's probably, I think, where I was most involved. And I ended up doing a lot of the VFX myself too.
You know what's funny is that I feel like, so the editor that we hired, I knew, I'd worked with him on CVNT5, and I knew that he was very, very post savvy, like really like better at VFX than I am, for sure. And I'm fine at VFX, but which is a thing that I look for in editors in particular, because as we talked about on the show many times, I want somebody who is aware of the elasticity of footage and how to bend it to our needs, right?
Yes.
So a good example is there's a shot at the end of one of the spots where a character enters a beat later than I wanted. And so we rotoscoped that character out and then layered them in on top of the footage and had them enter sooner.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
And awesome.
And
totally
it helps
awesome.
that, like in a fast-paced 30-second commercial, having someone come in 5 frames earlier so you're not like lagging is such a huge difference. I mean, I did...
And literally, I think that's what we were talking about, 5 or 6 frames.
Yeah. I did when Rebel throws the coffee cups off the golf cart. The take we used, they kind of looked like they landed really close to the golf cart. So I removed them from the shot and put them back in and animated them to just go a little bit higher angle. Further. So it looked like they would land after 2 seconds instead of 1 second. And I think your brain doesn't pick up on those things consciously, but subconsciously, especially flow. Like that's awesome. Like roto and bring someone in like 6 frames earlier.
Dude, it was really awesome. And he was the person who did it. But as soon as I saw it was an aha moment for me of like, oh, right. It was like someone had just opened up, you know, a cabinet full of tools that I didn't realize we had. But all of them are invisible. You would watch my spots and no one would ever think we were using any rotoscoping, like we used AI to clean up it, like blown up insert shots. Like there's a lot of
what AI did you?
Topaz.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's sick. It's fucking awesome.
That's
it's like
cool.
so awesome. And we shot like, I'm trying to think, like 4.5 or like a beefy large high res image. But so the punch-ins are pretty significant, and like I said, rearranging things in the frame, all of that stuff. But so when we brought in the agency, there was a part of me that didn't want them to see how we had changed things, because then all of a sudden it's not under more scrutiny, but like
it's stuff that they hadn't like approved on set.
Well, no, not even that. It was just that it was like invisible stuff. And so all of a sudden, maybe like the illusion just falls apart a little bit. You know, it's kind of like showing them the magic tricks. Oh. Like they didn't realize that person entered 5 frames later in reality than they did.
See, I like showing the magic tricks. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I hear you a little bit.
You know what I mean? It was like a little bit of like, I just wasn't sure of how I felt about it, but I ended up showing them all. It was like we edited for 2 days, and like inevitably be like, the reason that the mailman is floating in the frame right now is because it's a rotoscope shot.
Right.
You know,
I guess I want the agency to think that I'm good at editing, so that they, you know, wouldn't even think of me on for a job that is mostly an editing job, you know? Okay. So finally we're through post. We've made these spots that we hopefully are happy with, which, by the way, you and I have both worked so hard on production before to just kind of have it ruined in post. So, I actually had a question for you on this. Do you have a director's cut of your spots?
You know, I pre-negotiated a director's cut. You know, I don't think I'll need one, honestly. Like the changes are so small, and the client was really happy with everything. So like, I think I'm just going to use the cuts as is. Okay,
that's awesome. Yeah, I do have a director's cut. There's 3 tiny tweaks.
Tell me.
There's a Rebel Wilson like shoots his flamethrower off, and then we cut to some soot cleaned off of her outfit as she's walking and talking to camera. In the official cut, she's just like, and it cuts, and like we go to the cleaning. But we had the VFX company actually made like this cool wipe of like, if we stay on the flamethrower for 2 extra seconds, it wipes the screen.
Oh yeah.
So I used that wipe on my version. I added 2 seconds. I looped her screaming.
Dude, we haven't talked about how great the sim on that flamethrower looks. It looks awesome.
Thanks.
It looks so good.
Thank you. That was not easy. You know, we had the post house take a stab at it. I took a stab at it, and then I got some quotes, one from our buddy Barnstorm. You know, the people that make real flame sims, you know, mainly in Houdini, and there's another program called EmberGen that's getting popular. But, you know, you need real people that know how to do that. And we ended up going with this company, The Artery.
There are a handful of things that I think you and I are both confident can be DIY'd, whether it's us or somebody else or just a really good editor. Like After Effects can get the job done. Flame sims, don't mess with it. And you gotta go pro.
Yeah, the problem was we originally weren't gonna need one because she was just gonna hold the flamethrower. But the funniest take is when she picks it up and she's like, like yelling. She only did that in 1 take, and she swings the flamethrower all over the place.
Yeah.
So once you start moving things in 3D space, you need to simulate the fire, or else it just looks so fake.
And it looks so much better than if you had done the 2D version.
Yeah. We tried.
It really, it looks so luxe. It looks so much more expensive.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, so I wanted it, we all like love the shot, and we wanted to keep it on the screen longer, but we had the 60-second limit. So on the director's cut, it's 62 seconds. So I lengthened that, and that transition bumped me. A lot of times, like, it can be pretty funny for comedy going from someone screaming, to a hard cut to something else quiet, but it just always bumped me, and so I felt like just giving that visual transition helped. And then at the end, she accidentally sets this guy's jetpack off, and he flies up in the air, and she goes, "Why'd you do that? That's like an expensive stunt." And the client, because they had already spent more on the PSA than they wanted to, did not like that line. That's just something that she improvised. But I thought it was hilarious. So
funny.
And it just kind of had like a nice ending feel to it. So I put that, just the audio back in. And then the client also didn't like how many pythons were about to attack her at the end. Any loose pythons. So their version has 2 very subtle pythons and mine has 3 slightly less subtle pythons.
Yeah, that's funny. That's really funny.
But that's it. Everything else is the same because the creative team on this really pushed for making it good. They were pushing for the creative, which a lot of times at some point people give up and just do whatever the client is asking for. And the client was really cool too. They were like, okay, if you really think this is funnier or better, more people will react to this, or Rebel will like it better or whatever, we'll do that. So the spot's done. So we're in 2 different situations, right? Because yours isn't coming out till March. Mine came out last week. Right?
I have an important question for you. Was there a set photographer?
So there was, but he didn't take any photos of me.
So for listeners at home who haven't had the privilege of a BTS set photographer on these big shoots, especially if there's a celebrity, most agencies will spring for a photographer who's there just to shoot awesome photos day in and day out.
And also use them for other marketing and
stuff. They use them for social media and this and that, all sorts of stuff. So, and we tend to, as directors, I'm always pretty buddy-buddy with them because they're probably shooting, stills that they'll call in situ. Like in situation, we'll need the celebrity holding the product or doing this or that. And so they will need to jump in and shoot in our lighting setups, basically. And it's only a couple minutes in between setups, but like I'm very sympathetic to those people because I used to have to do that for social media for Comedy Central back in the day. Like if I was at an event or something, I'd be like, hey, I need to grab some photos real quick on my phone. So embarrassing. So they're real photographers. I was not. So if you're friends with them, maybe you can get a couple great photos of you, like talking to a famous person. Mine, it's a bummer because there was a set photographer. The agency did send me some nice stills. I've got a mask around my chin for all of them. So they're not the best looking photos.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah. Especially recently.
Yeah. But so did you, you didn't get any good behind the scenes photos?
I'll show you them. I have a couple. I mean, I always take a couple selfies at the very end.
Yeah.
Oh, I also did this. Did I talk about it on the podcast? How like I was saying bye to her through a window to Rebel because she had to go do this interview as we were like running out, and I don't know why I did it, but like I blew her a kiss, and I was like,
no, that's very weird.
I know.
Do not do that.
It wasn't like a romantic kiss. It was like
I don't go in for the hug goodbye unless they show the initiative on it.
I go in for the hug, but
I'm saying like I'm following their lead.
Right. If they're standoffish or something, I would. But then she was in a window through a window, and I was outside, and I was like, bye. And I made this whole movie with deaf people, and like the sign for thank you is like
thank you is not unlike that. Yeah,
it's
totally.
like, and so I kind of just like by instinct kind of did that. I was like, you're awesome, thank you, mwah, like that type of thing. And then she like blew me a kiss back. I was like, was that just so weird that I did that?
So listeners at home, what's Oren's doing is not like a
kiss.
He's not like seducing a French cartoon.
Well, there was
skunk.
no sound either because there was a window between us.
You're just like, it's like air applause or like incredible, like almost like a chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Like
mwah.
Great work, thank you.
But still, not something that I would do with an actor, that I just met that day. And I was like, did I just make things so weird? Why did I do that?
The way that you did it in the video chat, at least, was I wouldn't have guessed you would do, but isn't super weird. It's kind of like...
Right. I'm also like just not in general like a super lovey-dovey type personality,
Well, I don't think we've talked about this ever, but I think that Hollywood... Like even like hugging people hello and goodbye, I didn't really do much as a child or like until Hollywood, basically. You know what I mean? And that's a thing that's more common now. I remember we've talked about it for years now, but the last season of Project Greenlight, the director I remember him being weird about not wanting to hug people, and then the head of HBO being like, "Oh, you're a hugger now." Like it was a teeny tiny moment that most people wouldn't notice. But I remember being like, "Yeah, you do." There is this adjustment period where like shaking hands is way less common than a hug hello, regardless of, you know, gender or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
A little bit. I mean, I kind of tend to shake hands in the morning. You know, like, hey, I'm Oren. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Introducing yourself is totally different than like, oh, we've worked together. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Or like
no, I mean, if it was like Yuki
friend.
or like a DP I've worked with a million times, hug goodbye. But if, or even just a fist bump, especially during COVID. But
sure.
But if it's someone like an actor that you met in person for the first time that morning, I would usually do a handshake. And at the end, like if I feel like we had some camaraderie and it was good and it feels natural, like a hug goodbye, you're amazing, hug bye. But the kiss blowing was just so weird.
So funny and weird. Yeah, that's weird.
And it definitely was interpreted as that because she did it back to me. And I felt like we both felt like it was a little weird. But then I don't think I've told this story before, but do you know who Paul Downs is?
Yeah, sure.
He's like on Hacks. You know, he's one of the writers.
He's the manager character on Hacks.
Yeah, and he's also and he's also married to the director Lucia Agnello, who's amazing and has done Broad City, and she directed the Dollar Shave Club commercial that put Dollar Shave Club on the map. I shot this thing years ago. It was with Jack Black, Sarah Silverman, Will Arnett, Adam Pally, and Paul Downs. Like, and at the time he was 1,000,000 times less famous than everyone else. And I barely knew he was in this movie Rough Night. They'd done something
with Lucia directed as well.
That had come out recently.
Yeah. It was like at the same time as Girls Trip.
Yeah.
It was the same summer, and like Girls Trip was the one that broke out, and Rough Night was like Scarlett Johansson and
like
Jillian
Amy
Bell
Schumer or someone. I don't know. Yeah, maybe Jillian Bell. Yeah,
Jillian Bell. Yeah. They accidentally kill a stripper.
Yeah,
and
which,
then like,
I mean, who
hide the
hasn't
body
done?
or whatever.
So I kind of knew of him, and I for some reason I was so nervous meeting him. I walked up to him and I was like, "Hey, how's it going? You're Oren, right?" And I was like, I'm Oren. You're Paul." And there are all these people around us, and his manager's like, "That was weird."
Dude.
And it ruined my whole. And we only had each person for like 1 hour, you know?
Well, so that actually brings me back to, in terms of interacting with celebrity talent, this person, I was wearing my mask and it looked stupid. It kind of had like ridden up on my chin, so it kind of looked like a duckbill, but I had a full beard and I couldn't tell. And she was like, "Sorry, hold on. What is happening with your mask?"
That's
and
hilarious.
I had to lean into it. I had to like embrace that it was funny and stupid and silly, and like I'm not taking myself too seriously. We all had a good laugh. I knew the crew super well. They all were given permission to laugh as well. You know what I mean? It was like a nice little bonding thing. And if you take yourself too seriously, then you're like, yeah, that was weird. Oh, God, what am I doing? And I think, you know, maybe in a different scenario or situation, I would have been humiliated, you know?
Yeah.
And not been able to get over it. I probably haven't told you this story.
No.
But on a job not that long ago, like less than a year ago, my pants were too low, like sagging too low.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like in front of the camera, and I bent down to like get an eye on a prop or something, or just kind of see what the lens was seeing, but with my own eyes. And multiple people were like, "Hey, dude, you need to pull your undies up."
Crack kills.
Everybody can see. Yeah. And that did take me. It took me a second to shake. I was like embarrassed.
That's embarrassing.
Like your butt crack on screen broadcast to all of the people you need to impress. It's embarrassing. Anyway, but the point of like owning it to show that you were game, right? Because comedians in particular are famous for giving each other a hard time. And so if you can't play ball, if you're too sensitive, and none of this was anywhere near any sort of line. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I did actually look ridiculous. It wasn't, you know, so it was all completely
also
appropriate.
the person
like,
you were working with, that is very on brand for her.
Yeah. But if I had been bristly about it, it would have ruined the day. Easy.
Yeah. Well, no, you can't be. Bristly isn't an option, but you can be embarrassed about it.
Sure. Yeah. And it wasn't a conscious thing, but like in the moment, looking back on it, I'm happy I handled it that way, basically.
So, okay, so my spot's done. Your spot's coming out in March. What to do when the spot, when you're, and again, we're talking specifically about our commercials. This could be your short films finally done, your features coming out, your show. I guess a feature is a different, something you spent 2 years on versus like a few weeks,
different deal. Yeah.
I guess maybe it's more focused for kind of short form type of work you made.
My advice actually is the same for your feature versus your short form anything.
Even versus commercial.
Even versus commercials. And it's inspired by you, Oren Kaplan, but it's a version of a maxim that we've known for a long time.
Just post it.
Just post it. But when you're posting about things, it's okay to post the trailer or the version of it or whatever and be like, hey, I'm so excited. You shout out all the people that you worked with together, all that stuff. I'm really proud of this. That's a good post, and people will be excited for you. And I do those posts all the time.
Try to tag as many people that worked on it as possible because A, it's nice to acknowledge them, and B, maybe they'll repost it.
But the next level thing you can do, the more important thing to do, is to be additive, right? But with the top of this conversation, you were talking about like how your posts are content, and the difference between hashtag self-promotion post, which if you're in a supportive community is totally fine, and some people are going to roll their eyes at it or whatever, like, oh boy, Oren's posting about his work again. But the thing that you do really well, and I think that all listeners should think about, is your posts that are more educational, stuff where you're saying like, this is explicitly the technique or the idea that I tried to implement in this thing, and maybe that can affect your work in some way. So for example, with this one, you talked about Easter eggs, and you showed all of the different details, and you had little stills with like the cause and effect of all of the different gags that are probably not apparent in the first viewing of your spot, and it adds a layer of rewatchability to it. But it's instructive. You're leading by example of like, oh, this is a way that you can make your creative work better by layering in these details, and I had a really fun time doing it. That's so much more powerful than the just straight self-promotion thing, right? And I'm not saying that everyone needs to make tutorials out of every single thing that they shoot, but explaining to people why you're proud of your work and what you did specifically that might not be apparent is really valuable and could be and should be inspiring to your creative community. And that is the way to selfishly promote yourself, but also help people and spread creativity as well.
That's the hope. If you're not interested in my work, at least maybe it's interesting to talk about how we work,
Right. Well, and I think that when you break things down, it becomes applicable to things outside of the narrow niche of commercial directing, right? So like if you had done a similar post, but it was about your feature or about your short film or about your short story, all of that stuff I think still applies to all of the many disciplines that all of your community members are.
Yeah, and it can be about anything. Like you put together a swing set for your kids, and this is like how you did it by yourself when you need two people or whatever. And I've done a lot of these posts where it's like the final versus the storyboards. Even if I make another post that's like that, I'm going to try to frame it in a different context. Like I have one that I prepared, I haven't posted it yet, but about like I previs the whole thing with me doing what the actor's doing for Marriott hotels. And I don't want to just do a side by side because everyone does that, right? Like it just gets boring. Like, okay, so yeah, your boards look like you shot your boards. But I want to talk in that one about like how I chose the rooms when you're given a location, like a hotel. They're like, here, you got to shoot it here. So I want to go kind of into details to like why I chose this room to shoot this and this room here, and why having a window here is helpful, but having this foreground is helpful here. I think choosing where in a location to shoot is like a thing that we think about a lot and get better at and sometimes get worse at. And so I think I'm trying to find a new angle on each thing. And then I want to do like another post for the Rebel Wilson thing that's just about how I pitched it, just kind of like re-recording me pitching it to the agency.
Oh, that's fun.
And kind of doing it side by side with the actual video and seeing what I pitched and what we shot.
Yeah. I did video boards for my piece as well. And I think I'm trying to figure out how to post about the value of doing that in terms of understanding what the performer is going through. Because I found that to be, historically, that's always been really insightful, but in particular when it's essentially one person and you've got some gobbledygook and you've got a lot of complicated moves and this and that, just literally understanding, oh, this is hard. Right. Or like, oh,
or hitting this mark and saying this line and picking this
really
bag up
sense
at the same time. Yeah,
it's all weird. And honestly, there were instances where I did it as in pantomime, and then when we had the actual props, you realize how much harder it is, how much more complicated it is, and how awkward it can be, and had to adjust as a result.
Yeah.
You know?
My only question is is anyone not doing video boards nowadays?
Yeah, sure. All the time. But certainly, it's not like, hey, do video boards. It's like, I found video boards to be helpful for this reason. Are you thinking about it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly. that is really smart. And that's a reason why you should act out the part in your video boards, because I think a lot of our instinct is to be the camera person
100%
on our video boards.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? It's much harder to nail the performance than it is to nail the camera move. Well, cool. So yeah, and then just promote the hell out of it. Today I have like a browser window with 10 different tabs that did write-ups on my spot, and like, one's like shots and ad age and ad week and stuff. And I'm like, should I post these? Should I do like a thing, or is it just something that I have? It's hard to figure out at what point the returns go from diminishing returns to negative returns.
Like Ad Age is recognizable in a way that big press is, you know what I mean? Like Ad Age is the only publication I would guess that a layperson may be familiar with, and mostly because of Mad Men.
Right. But I don't even really care about lay people as much as
industry people.
Yeah. Like kind of a big reason to post this stuff is that people are like, oh, Matt did this thing that's everyone's talking about. Let's get him in the mix.
Well, so this was the thing I was going to ask you about is how thoughtful are you in terms of the strategy behind your post, right? Like, because every platform privileges a different style of post more, right? Like you could get into the weeds on like an Instagram post that's multiple slides, like 7 to 8 is algorithmically weighted stronger, heavier than one post. Like a single image, all of that stuff. Time of day, hashtag. So you could get into the weeds on it in a way that is probably pretty helpful.
Yeah, I do one by one on Instagram, and I try to fill the whole carousel up.
So you fill the whole carousel up? Though?
Yeah, and I'll do a post, and then I'll turn it into a story the next day. So it's kind of like lasting like 48 hours or something. But something I've been thinking about recently, because, it was Kara, my wife's birthday yesterday, and I'd shot this like promo for our podcast with her a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and I was watching it. I was like, oh man, I really love this thing. And it kind of just disappeared. And I was like, it's her birthday. Maybe I'll just repost it from the Just Shoot It account. And a lot of people that had never seen it were like, oh, we love this, and like sent messages and loved it. I'm like, how valuable is it to repost?
Resurface?
Yeah. Throwback type of stuff. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. There's a lot of work from last year that I haven't posted about, just because I was
right. Well, if you didn't post about it at all, then you get a fresh post.
Yeah. I think that if in the same way, this is real social media stuff, but like news pegs. So your wife's birthday being a perfect example of like, oh, you can post that if the celebrity, it's their birthday, if there's something big that happens.
Oh, like I just posted this thing with Jalen Hurts because the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect example. I think all of that stuff is apropos. I think it boils down to, does it feel a little gross or not? And if it feels a little gross, then maybe, think about it.
Oh, I thought a little gross is okay.
A little gross might be okay. Anything beyond that, But again, that's why I think that being additive to the conversation, not purely self-promotional, but here's the thing that adds value that people will be inspired by or they can employ in their own way, negates the gross factor. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got something that's you're proud of, and you can't think of a smart way to talk about it that's applicable to other people, then you need to give it a little bit more thought.
Yeah.
But,
By the way, also something that you don't love but there's something about it that you do really like, this is a good opportunity to say like, hey, you know, I look at these sets I designed and how they came out, and you don't actually have to show the final piece because you didn't like the final work, but you liked part of the process. You can just post about that process, and you kind of get the credit for doing it without having to show someone something you don't love.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all the biggest critics of our own work. So there's that to it as well.
Yeah. I met a few others.
Yeah.
They criticize my work. But yeah. Well, cool, Matt. Hopefully this has been helpful.
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's some good nuggets.
Think, honestly, the social media conversation, I think, is pretty valuable. The final thing I'll say about the social stuff before we go is that like everyone has their own style, and I think it's easy to like look at what you're doing and it's really educational, it's really tutorial based, and that's not exactly my style, you know. And I think that it's better to just go ahead and post and start the conversation and figure things out. And like if you're directly cribbing what someone else is doing, that's not the end of the world, because it's, you know, you're still just talking about your own work and trying to figure out a way to make it make sense. But like the difference between, say, you and Jordan Brady does great TikToks where he's still giving tips, but he's doing it in his style where he's speaking.
He's on a bird scooter.
He's on a bird scooter. He's wearing a scarf. He's saying all the stuff, or he's having a conversation with himself, you know, it feels much more off the cuff, you know, even when it's clearly produced. That's Jordan's thing. That's different than yours, but you're going to figure that stuff out. You're going to figure out what resonates with your community and all of that. So, so don't sweat it too much, I guess, is what I'm saying to everyone, including myself, because I've got stuff.
Something is better than nothing.
Yeah. Do you think it's worth it to post it on Valentine's Day, which is the day that we're recording this?
Yes.
Or do you wait?
I think, I think people are just like constantly cruising.
Just online.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't think anyone cares about Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm constantly giving myself excuses to not do something. So,
also Tuesday's the perfect day to post. PS.
That's true.
Well, cool. Do you have a minute to join me for an unpaid endorsement?
Unpaid endorsement.
Well, Oren, I've got a fun one for you. I think you're going to like this.
I'll take it.
Are you familiar with the Instagram account Director Fits?
No, I don't think so.
It is an account dedicated exclusively to the fashion of directors, famous directors, and what they're wearing, mostly on set.
I actually wouldn't mind knowing what more directors look like.
I know. That's why I brought it up to you. I'm looking at one that's got Paul Thomas Anderson on the set of There Will Be Blood, and he looks like a doofus. There's one of Steven Spielberg where he's wearing like a polo shirt and a bucket hat from like, it looks like Jaws maybe, where he looks like a real friggin' doofus. John Waters and Jim Jarmusch looking incredible. It's a real treat. So it's like, it's old vintage stuff, it's newer stuff, but it's nice to know what people dress like. There's one of John Carpenter and Kurt Russell in identical outfits. That's great, from The Thing, I assume.
Yeah, Paul Thomas Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread also wearing the same outfit. I wonder if they're like, a lot of times they're doubling for their, you know, doing inserts and stuff.
Yeah, probably against SAG rules, but yeah. It's great. There's all sorts of different looks and vibes, and I think it gives you permission to both dress up a little bit for set, which I like, and also dress down for set. Because I think you and I both kind of are a little confused sometimes of like, well, you want to look like the director, but you need to work. Like I'll wear boots to set all the time. If I wore a Patagonia jacket, people would think I was a grip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shout out to grips out there.
Until you set up a C-stand, and then people will know.
They're like, oh, God. Anyway, Director Fits, FITS, as in like outfits, on Instagram. Kaplan, what you got?
So I read an article just this morning that I saw on Dig. It's a Medium article, which probably means like someone just like self-published it. But the title it's from someone named Addie Page, and the title is "Scientists Warn of a Friendship Recession." I'm part of it. And she talks about the 11-3-6 rule of how to make adult friendships. And
Tell me more.
The premise is it's not easy. But basically, it takes about 11 different encounters that are each 3 hours long over the course of 6 months to turn an acquaintance into an actual friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
She talks about how she went to take a improv comedy class, and when they were like, "So why are you guys here?" She went first, and she's like, "Fuck it, I'll just be honest. I just honestly wanted a reason to leave my house and meet some people." And she said every single other person in the class said the same thing. Like, "Oh, my wife told me I need to get out. I've been working from home and I don't." And just that there's this obviously like partially pandemic fueled or at least accelerated dearth of adult friendships, and people don't know how to make friends. And she doesn't really have like solutions aside from, signing up for things. But if you are one of those adults that feels like, I used to have all these friends when I was a kid, and now I'm just like, don't even know who to call to go grab a lunch with or something. You're not alone. It's like a real thing going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it a little bit offline. Yeah, it's real, and I think you and I are lucky in that we have a podcast.
Yeah.
And so we get to talk to somebody every week. Yeah. Whether it's each other or oftentimes another party as well. And so,
I mean, just for the record, I do still think of you as an acquaintance.
Yeah. Business partner. Yeah, for sure. But like, we didn't know each other super well when we started the show.
Right.
And how else do people make friends? Like they make friends at work or like in school. Like
she had a list. She's like basically work and school, and a lot of people that aren't in school and that work from home do not have those advantages.
I feel like sometimes the podcast actually makes a false sense of friendship in so much as like you'll have a meaningful conversation with an artist that you admire, that you respect, and it's really good. And then, you friend each other on social media, and then maybe we never talk to them ever again. But so it's like a fake version of friendship. We've made real friends from the show, certainly, but everyone's busy and out, like at home, basically.
Yeah.
So like maintaining those friendships, I think, becomes a thing that gets harder and harder as well.
But I suspect that there's this thing where everyone assumes that everyone else is busy and has their own things going on and doesn't want to grab lunch or just have a phone call or whatever with you. Yeah. And I think probably most of the times we're wrong about that when we have those thoughts.
Hit up your friends, especially your old friends. You don't get that many old friends in life,
Yeah.
Like your chance of having an old friend isn't really there anymore.
Yeah. But also if you want to have new friends,
hit them up.
Make an effort to do things. We have a lot of new parent friends just through our kids. And sometimes I'm like, I wonder if there's an event that I can invite a couple of these other dads to go to with me. Like one dad we know, Grant, who was on the podcast, just went to a monster truck rally with his kid.
Was that fun?
He said it was exactly what he expected.
Yeah.
I was like, would you go back? He's like, maybe. But I'm like, what is like a thing that I can be like, hey, you want to come with me to this event? Like unrelated. Actually, these DGA events are
That's
kind of
nice.
like fun things to be like randomly ask
An
different
anchor.
people. Like, hey, you want to go do this thing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's not like based around our kids and spouses.
Well, and I think the DGA stuff is work, so it's good for a workaholic as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I simultaneously feel so busy I don't have time for anything, and would love to make more friends.
Yeah. I get it, buddy.
And meaningful ones.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Don't know how to transition out of it, but keep us posted on adult friendships. Of all sorts. Or
if you want to tell us about your friends, email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can find us across all social media at Just Shoot It Pod. You can rank us on iTunes and maybe even leave a review just for funsies if you don't do the Patreon. And you can follow me. I'm on Instagram at @okaplan. I'm on Twitter at SmiteyPyleg.
And I'm across all social media at Mr. Matt Enlow. This episode was produced by Tyler Small, and you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.